I'm so glad that you tuned in for my all thrillers episode. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today we're going to talk about all the thrillers I read in 2023. So last year I did something kind of like this. I did like my favorite thrillers from the previous year, and I remember talking about in one of my posts earlier that I only had one 5-star thriller in 23. And so I was like, well, but I had a lot of really good thrillers, and there was only one like that I didn't really like. So I was like, let's just put all the thrillers in one spot. Let's put every thriller that I read in 2023 in one episode. So here we are. That's what we're doing today. Before we get into it, make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week. And all we do on this channel is talk about books. So if you like listening to people talk about books, here I am every week doing just that for you. So there is actually not that many thrillers for 23. I talked about this a little bit, I think when I was setting my goals for this year, because I just didn't get that many thrillers last year. And I think the reason was because I wanted to read more horror, which I did. I read more horror last year, which was great. And I wanted to read more diverse books, which I did last year, and it was great. And so I think that because I was focusing on those two specific things, that the thrillers kind of got pushed back or to the side a little bit. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah, but I've started off really good this year. I actually haven't read that many thrillers this year. And the thing is, I'm like, oh, it's still early in the year. It's not though. It's May, which like in one more month we're going to be at the halfway point of the year, which I can't even think about really, because that's terrifying in a weird way. So we're not going to think about it. So yeah, every thriller that I read in 23, and I think it's 6 books if I remember correctly. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. Okay, the first thriller I read in 2023 was Kill You Twice by Chelsea Cain. Okay, this is part of the Archie Sheraton Gretchen Lowell serial killer thriller series, which I finished in 23. I was so proud of myself. This was the second to last book, and I actually talked about this a couple weeks ago in my 5-star reads, because this one was a 5-star for me. I did in that episode say that this was the final book. It's not the final book, but it was the second to last book. And this one, okay, so a little preface. Let's talk about what the series is about. Gretchen Lowell is a female serial killer, and Archie Sheraton is the detective that was heading up her case that she abducted and tortured for 3 days, and he was the only victim of hers that ever survived. And basically the whole series, Gretchen and Archie are connected in one way or another in every book, and either he's consulting with her to try and catch someone who's copycatting her, or she's making attempts to escape. There is a lot of chemistry between these two characters. He didn't simply just get abducted. She manipulated him emotionally a lot. And as we're moving through the series, we're getting more and more of their story, and so every book was just so well done. My biggest gripe, I think there's 7 books in this series. Book 4, if you've been with my channel a minute, you have heard me beef with book 4, okay? I can't even remember if it's book 4 or book 3, but there is one book in particular that I was so disappointed in, and it basically halted the whole series for me. I stopped reading it for almost 2 years because I was so disappointed in that book. I thought maybe she had tanked the whole series, but this was the second to last one, and this was the first one that I read after reading the one that I was absolutely appalled with. And this one delivered. It was perfection. I think maybe she got a lot of backlash for the book before this one, because this one was probably one of the best ones of the series. The twists were so good. Gretchen and Archie on the page together was just perfection. And we get a whole host of side characters in these books that are just absolutely amazing. I've fallen in love with all of these characters. I'm really sad this series is over. I really loved it. I really did. This series, if you haven't read it and you like thrillers and you like female serial killers, like the whole dynamic of that, I think you would really like this. Okay, the next thriller I read in 23 was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Okay, so I ended up giving this 4 stars. I feel like I don't want it to have 4 stars anymore because I really just didn't like it that much, and which is a super unpopular opinion because I feel like I see this book everywhere. Everyone's talking about this book and how much they loved it and everything. I don't know. Okay, so basically we have a male main character that gets abducted one night going to a meeting of some kind, like a social gathering. And when he figures out who's abducted him, it ends up being himself. That's come from a different time period, a different universe, to kidnap him. And he sends the abducted version of him back to his universe. And in his universe, like, everything's different, you know? Like, the whole point of this is for our main character that got abducted to get back to his universe, to his family, to his life. And it is thrilling. It is thrilling because we are jumping through different universes and seeing a lot of different things, a lot of interesting things. Okay, if you like the whole idea of the multiverse, if you like the whole idea of, this almost felt like the Midnight Library in a sense, where you're like seeing the different versions of yourself in real time. But there's also a very thrilling aspect to this because, like, the reason that he got abducted was a malicious reason, you know, and getting himself back there was very daunting and difficult. This book felt so messy. I just don't even know how better to describe that, but it was just a mess, like, the whole time. I was like, when are we gonna figure this out? When are we gonna get this together? And then I just felt like everything sort of happened at the end when there was legitimately no rhyme or reason to it have worked out. And the plot holes, don't even get me started on the plot holes, because what do you mean? There were so many, and everyone just kind of like overlooked a lot of these things, and it's like, why are you guys overlooking all these issues? I think this is a book that when you look at it and you don't dig and you take everything at face value, yes, I think it works. I think it's an interesting concept. I think that it is very thrilling, but I think if you dig just a millimeter under the surface into what this book is, it all falls apart. We ended up doing this one for my book club, and we all kind of, when we sat down, we all kind of agreed that, yeah, we really liked it. It was really thrilling. It was really interesting. But then when we started picking at it, it was like disintegrating. And yeah, this definitely has a science fiction edge to it, and some of it is very dense. So if you do not vibe with science fiction like a lot, some of this is very technical and a little bit much for me anyway. I'm not a huge science fiction reader because of the technicality of it. Like, this goes back to my whole thing with fantasy too. Like, I just can't be bothered. Okay, I'm here to have a good time. I'm not here to write a dissertation or to learn how chemicals balance each other. It's not my jam. It's not why I'm here. Okay? I'm here to have fun. And having a science lesson is not fun for me. But if it's fun for you, you might like it. But yeah, I definitely had issues with this book. I typically don't change my ratings. Like, once I make my rating and I move on, I don't change it. But like, now that I have sat and thought about it, 4 stars for me was too generous. I don't think I should give this 4 stars. It should have 3 stars. Yeah, there were a lot of issues for me, and when I look back on it, I'm just like, it was fine. It was really hard to get through, but it was fine. But yeah, plot holes galore for me. There was just a lot of stuff that just wasn't ever explained away. And every time I hear someone talking about this book, like so positively, like hyping it up, I scroll away. Honestly, I do, because like obviously we're not vibing on the same level right now. Because I didn't love it. So, I don't know. Do with that what you will. There it is. The next thriller that I read in 23 was Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. Okay, this one was really good. And this sort of had a similar theme to the Blake Crouch book, which was like super interesting. Not like a similar theme, but I mean, kinda. Okay, so picture it. A mother wakes up, has a perfectly normal day. Her teenage or like young adult son comes home really late, and she just has this weird sense like something's wrong, something's not right. And she goes outside as she sees him walking towards the house, and before he can get to the house, he kills somebody on their street. Just and their whole life comes crashing down, right? Worst day ever is like an understatement. Okay, so she's like, I'm going to bed after things kind of get semi-normalized. She goes to bed. And when she wakes up in the morning, she is in the day before the day her son murders somebody. And every day after that, she wakes up in a day before, and a day before, and a day before. And so she has to figure out how, one, she's going to get out of this weird time loop thing that she's in, and two, if she can stop her son from killing somebody. Or at least like figuring out what was happening, why did he kill this person, etc., etc. This book was just so masterfully done. Like, Gillian McAllister picked this so clean. I thought it was so interesting. It does sort of have this time travel multiverse feel to it, but she's not multiversing, if that makes sense. Like, she's not going somewhere else where there's another version of her. Like, she wakes up as herself, just not the same self that was there in the specific time that she went back to. This ticked a lot of really cool boxes, and then the underlying like storyline here, messy. It was so messy. There was just every couple of chapters I was just blown away. There was some new thing, and at no point in the book was I like, I know what happened. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. This was probably one of the best thrillers that I ended up reading in 2023. I gave it 4 stars. Now, for the life of me, I can't think of why I didn't give it 5. I want to say it was the ending, and I think, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's like everything just sort of snapped. So normally, if that makes sense, like, yeah, I feel like there were some things, like, I really wanted just, like, a couple more pages of closure at the end. Yeah. And that's so picky of me. That's so picky of me, because I'm sitting here talking about it. I really, really liked it. Like, I will recommend this book to anybody that likes thrillers. So for me to sit here and be that picky about it, like, I feel kind of stupid. But yeah, here we are. This one is definitely good. Okay. The next one is What You Never Knew by Jessica Hamilton. I don't even know what to say about this book. This was the worst thriller I read last year. Which, like, you know, I don't know. This whole book was just chaotic and not well put together, and it just was veering in so many directions. I literally didn't know what she wanted me to think. I don't know. We were not on the same page ever. And we read this for my book club too, and everyone sort of felt the same way. They were like, I just don't know what she wanted me to think, what she wanted me to feel, why we were doing so many different things that had nothing to do with what we were looking at. Same. I don't know. I don't even know what this book wanted to be. So let's do a little premise. We have a main character whose mother dies, right? And this mother is like pretty horrible. Like, she's not winning any Mother of the Year awards. But when her and her sister were young, they lived on their own island that their dad bought their mom. There's a lot of classism things in this book. And then one day they wake up and their mom's like, your dad left us, we're leaving the island and we're never coming back. And they're like, excuse me, he left us? What do you mean? And he's never seen again. Never. And they leave the island and they never go back. And their mom told them, I sold the island, right? So they go on with their lives, whatever. And then the mom dies, old age, like very normal, nothing dramatic or anything like that. And in her will, she's like, by the way, I didn't sell the island. You can have it. So the younger sister, who is a very flawed character, which I loved, okay, that's the only thing I loved about this book. She's like, you know what? I'm going to go to the island because it was some of the best memories of my childhood. I need to like reconnect. I need to refocus. I need to put myself back together. I am going to the island and I'm going to see what it's like and if I can move forward with my life. And then when she gets there, like immediately the townspeople are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're back after what your family did. And she's like, what do you mean? It's like, oh, about how your mom said that somebody killed your dad. Yeah. So already is a lot, right? Basically, she goes back to the island and she uncovers that the possibility that her dad is dead, or at least these people think that he's dead. And like there was a whole investigation. There was like the island was shut down. People were brought in for questioning. People were arrested on suspicion of murdering him. Like it was a whole thing that they didn't know anything about. They're just finding out all this stuff for the first time. So she's sitting there trying to pick through her memories, pick through all this stuff, and see if she can figure out what actually happened and why her dad disappeared and why they left the island and never went back. Okay, on paper, that sounds pretty good, right? Sounds pretty normal, whatever. When, let's like right off first page, there's some paranormal stuff happening right off the first page. And so I'm like, okay, it could be like a paranormal thriller. Pretty cool idea. No. It was not a paranormal thriller. But that was in there for I don't know what reason. I really don't, because it didn't make any sense. And there were just a lot of things along the way that was like, what are we doing? What is happening? And like, I think there's a difference in a red herring versus like just putting stuff in the book for funsies. And there were way too many funsies moments in this book where it's like, what were we doing? How did this make it through? One, okay, how did this make it through a beta reader, an agent, a proofreader, and like the final reader, which would be the editor? How did it make it through all of these people? And everybody was like, yes, these elements all work so incredibly well together. Let's keep them all. Somebody needed to put their foot down and be like, half of this has to go. Half of it needed to go. Okay, and I just don't understand why nobody put their foot down. I don't know who Jessica Hamilton is, or if she's like someone super special where people felt like they couldn't say no to her or something, but there was just way too much trying to happen on the page, and a lot of it did not hit, a lot of it missed, and at the end, there were still so many things where we were like, what about this? What about that? What about this thing that happened? I won't talk on it anymore. But this one definitely got 3 stars. My whole book club did not like it. Like, this was the first book in a while that we were all like, no. That just doesn't happen that often for us. And so this was a tough one. And a lot of us struggled through it. So yes, I would avoid this one. The next book I read that was a thriller in 23 was Let Me Go by Chelsea Cain. This was the final book in the series. And it was so hard to read this book because I knew it would be me saying goodbye to this series, like, as a whole. Someone said that she continued these characters in a different series, but that series has like 15 books or something like that. And I was like, no, I'm not doing any crossover. No, not doing any crossover business. Okay. If you end a series, that should be it. Like, I really hate the idea of crossovers. I don't know why. But yeah, so this was the goodbye for me. I really liked this one because the pace was really quick. Like, it all happened within like 2 or 3 days, and the pace for that was just insane. And there was like, we were finally getting the full breadth of the story between Archie and Gretchen, which we had waited for so long. Like, Chelsea Cain pieced this out so nicely so that every book you were getting your little hit, of their story, but this was like the conclusion. This was it. We were finally getting everything, and I was so happy, sad, mixed all together. And yeah, it was really, really well done. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and that's only because I felt like the ending was a little unfinished. Because, like I said, I think that she ended up doing this crossover thing with another book series that she was doing. And so this wasn't like the end for Archie and our side characters and stuff. But yeah, I think she could have ended it a little more for the people that were not going to be doing the crossover stuff with her other series. She could have put a little bit more of a closed ending on it, and then said, follow Archie through more adventures and these other books, something like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, this was the epic conclusion, and it did deliver. I just wanted a little bit more closure. Okay, the last thriller I read in 2023 was The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf. Okay, if you don't know about my winter aesthetic, this hits the brief like perfect. Like, look at this cover, right? This was just speaking to me. And then a friend of mine read this book, and she also really likes thrillers, and she's like, you got to read this one, it's so good. So I did, and it was so good. So the premise of the story, we have a female main character that writes true crime novels, and she decides to rent the cabin, of the true crime case that she's writing right now. Total vibe there. So she's at this cabin, there's a huge snowstorm, and she lets the dog out. And when she goes outside with the dog during the snowstorm, she sees a small child nearly frozen to death in the snow. Takes them inside, warms them up, and then someone comes looking, and not the someones you want. The depth to this story, okay, because we're not just getting this writer's true crime story, like, we're getting this true crime story that she's writing, right? We're getting her story with this child that she found half frozen to death outside of her cabin thing, and then we're also getting this completely other story that eventually all connects together. It was just wild and exciting and suspenseful. I couldn't put it down. And the pace was just fantastic on this book, and there was just so many times when I thought I had it right and I didn't. The final twists in this book were astounding. Like, there were just so many things that I wasn't expecting. Like, I didn't expect it to be so complex, honestly. And complexity either hits 2 ways for me. It either doesn't work because I can't connect it, it's too complex, I can't connect it, or it's fantastically put together. This was fantastically put together. Gudenkauf made sure everything fit together really nicely, and it was easy for the reader to enjoy and follow along, and you might have been able to solve it if you're like a really good solver. Again, I was just having a good time, so I wasn't in solving mode. But I really liked it. I ended up giving it 4 stars because at the end of the book I still had questions. Not huge questions, but there were just like little things that I was like, we never really talked about this. Why didn't we talk about it? So Yeah, 4 stars. I actually had Heather Gudenkauf on the lineup for April, and it's still early in April, so like she might get in the lineup. We'll see. But yes, check this one out, especially in the winter if you like winter-ish books. This one was really good. Okay, that's it. That was all of them. Like I said, there were 6. Yeah, I think it did pretty good. Like, I only had one that I really didn't like. I always think that's kind of a success. It's hard when you read a bunch of thrillers that don't hit, because then it's like you feel like you don't want to read them at all anymore, if that makes sense. And yeah, I was focusing a lot of my time last year on horror and LGBTQ books and BIPOC POC books. So I was just spread in different areas last year, but I am wanting to get back into thrillers. Just about every month I've had thrillers on the maybes list. It just depends on whether I had time, whether I could get them from my library, etc., things like that. So make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know I'm posting. I post every week. And yeah, let me know in the comments if you read any of those thrillers, if you liked any of them, how you felt about my reviews. I always love hearing from you guys, even if it's just to say hi and tell me what you're reading this week. Yeah, that's everything from me, and I will see you all next time. Bye!